All right, hello everybody. Steve Politi, Keith Sargent, Dan Duggan from NJ.com. We're here at Piscataway. Big week for Rutgers football. Spring game. A huge event some places, maybe not as big historically here. But I thought it was interesting what Chris Ash was talking about, making this into an event. I guess that's what it is. If you have a fan base that committed to seeing a football team, that you would come out to see what is essentially glorified practice in the middle of April, and yet 100,000 people did it in Columbus last weekend. I mean, how do you get to that point, I guess, is the big question.
Well, I mean, in all fairness, they generally average between 15 and 20,000 the last couple of years, and that generally ranks in the top 20, believe it or not, top 5, top 6 in the Big Ten. So, all things considered, Maryland the other day drew 2,000, and Temple right down the road drew 3,500. All things considered, they get 20, 25,000 depending on the weather. I don't think that's anything to sneeze at.
It's pretty good. I've got people going to come. If they're going to come, they're going to come to see the quarterbacks, obviously. We've been talking about this since, I don't know, 2009. Where does it stand now with the quarterback situation? In your estimation, he says it's even. Is it really even?
I think it is. I think everyone thought he'd come out today and say that it's back to Chris Laviano. But we have to remember, we only see portions of practice. So we see an hour here, an hour there, and we draw conclusions from that because, hey, that's what we have to do. But there's obviously a lot of practice that happens we don't see. There's a lot of things that happen in meeting rooms that we don't see. So I don't really see what Chris Ash would gain by saying it's even if it's not. I mean, I don't know what that would accomplish. So the fact that he said concretely there will be no decision made at the end of spring practice, I think that's kind of a big check mark to get past, because I think either you do it at the end of spring or it's going to be all the way in probably the second week of training camp. So he's put the eggs in that basket. It's going to be a while before he makes that decision.
I wonder if part of that is because is it possible the quarterback of this team is not on the team? Is that possible?
Think so. I mean, people have been talking about Kid Oden, who's a true freshman. When he comes in, he's not going to have a whole lot of time to digest the playbook. By all accounts, he looks a little frail. Probably needs to put on some weight. I don't think so. Maybe if he really progresses, maybe a quarter away into the season, maybe you try to get him game ready. But I think that's a tall order to win the job as a freshman with only a couple weeks to prepare.
And I have to get back to one thing you said. Chris Ash has been extremely honest.
Yes.
I don't think if he knew what the quarterback was going to be, I think we'd have a good sense of who the quarterback. Some of the things he said this spring have been great. I mean, we're talking about the linebackers and the inside linebackers. I mean, what do you get from his assessment of this team? I mean, where do you think it is overall? Is he pleased with what's going on, or is it as a big concern as it seems with some of the language he uses?
Well, yeah, like you said, he certainly doesn't pull any punches, but I think it's a good thing. I think this program kind of needed that little reality. Stop talking about winning titles and stuff. Let's just kind of fix a lot of the bigger issues, and obviously some of those issues are just talent. The recruiting has been bad for 4 years, basically. This is what's going to happen. You're going to end up with major holes. Now, that's not to say this is a terrible team. I mean, there's definitely some players. You look at the defensive line, a lot of veteran players, some talented players there. But then you go to that next level of linebacker, and he's throwing his hands up. Like, what am I going to do here? I mean, Jay Neiman, the defensive coordinator, said the same thing. So there definitely are some big holes. I still think quarterback is the biggest question mark. If you're this far along and nobody's separating themselves, and it's the Chris Laviano Hayden Reddick part 2, and no one obviously distinguished himself that much last year. I think that's obviously the big problem, but there are definitely other spots on this roster that are big question marks, and Chris Ash, to his credit, hasn't been afraid to let everybody know.
Have you seen enough of practice to see the system? Have you gotten a sense? I'm most interested to watch the spring game just to see how they operate offensively. I mean, we've talked so much about the spread and the difference it can make. They don't have the personnel for it yet, but still, I mean, have you seen enough of it to get a sense that it's going to be something different, something exciting?
Saturday was completely open, and it was Student Appreciation Day, and it's fast. I mean, there's no huddle, and they're operating at a really quick pace. I guess the biggest takeaway I had from watching it was Janarian Grant. I mean, he's going to have the ball. He's going to be. You asked like last couple of years, Leonte Carew was the playmaker. You knew you could bank on him. Janarian Grant's going to have a huge role in this offense, whether it's catching the ball in the flat, going deep, catching the ball, running the ball. I mean, he's going to have a huge role. I think they're still trying to identify the playmakers, running backs, and I think that's still a work in progress. I think there's a lot of depth there, but still trying to identify some playmakers there. But Janarian Grant is going to have a role.
How many times have we sat in the press box and said, this would be a good place for anything, the bubble screen or whatever, get the ball.
1,500 all-purpose yards last year. Granted, most of them were on kick return and punt return, but I mean, this is a kid. I mean, far and away, as much talent as there is on offense, he's going to have the ball.
What are you most interested to see on Saturday?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm interested to see how it all kind of comes together in a game because again we see snippets of practice, see just how the operation works, where they're going to be getting plays, and that whole thing will be a little bit different to see under the lights and a little less of a practice atmosphere. Defensively, it's going to be interesting to see just some of the combinations because again we've seen bits and pieces. And are those the first team linebackers? Well, he's going to kind of have to put his cards on the table as of right now. So you'll see some of the lineups up the depth chart. Because beyond that, I think we all get all excited. You watch 14 practices and you think there's going to be a game, and then it turns into being like running clock, and it's over before you know it, and it's pretty ugly. So it's more just I think the stuff that happens right at the start of kickoff, like who's on the red team and that type of stuff is the most interesting. Everything else is fun, and maybe you get a couple highlights, and someone jumps out and we wite about him like he's gonna be a Heisman candidate. But I think
what we would never do anything like that. Dan, come on. Think about defense. You forget how bad it was in the Maryland game. This is our last vision of this team. It was gashed for 650 something yards to a two-win Maryland team. I just don't. I could see the offense being dramatically different. I have a hard, even with improved tackle, I have a hard.
It's going to be an issue.
It's going to be a big issue to see that personnel get to a point where it's going to be able to stop a Big Ten offense.
What Dan said before, recruiting has been bad. Not only has the recruiting been bad, but they've lost 35% of the players from a 3-year recruiting period. So it affects linebacker, affects the back seven is really, on paper.
Question marks.
It's a big question mark. So, you're right. We're not going to get a whole lot of answers from the spring game. Chris Ash did talk about how he's taking it serious. So he's not going to it's not a game. Let's put it in perspective. But he is going to treat it seriously. So maybe someone emerges. Maybe you come away come 9:30 thinking that this team's going to win the Big Ten title.
Well, that would be something. Anyway, anything else? What else do we got here?
No.
Questions, comments? No. Any comments from the readers, Andy? No one. Nothing at all.
No comments.
No
We're
comments.
still building
all right.
the spring
Okay.
game
Hey,
frenzy. So
exactly.
that's early in
I'm
the
sure
week.
they'll be there on Saturday in the parking lot tailgating. Well, thanks for watching our Facebook Live video, and we'll see you on Saturday.